Hi, my name is Vanessa Vallely and welcome to Behind the Cover. We are the City series that looks at authors and their fantastic books. I'm absolutely overjoyed that this morning I'm being joined by the fantastic Michelle Moore, soon to be author of Real Wins, Race, Leadership and How to Redefine Success. Hi, Michelle.
Morning, Vanessa. Great to see you today.
And you, thank you for joining us. So obviously, Michelle, I know you, our paths have crossed. I've been a big fan for many, many years. But for the purpose of our audience, tell us a little bit about your background and your current role.
I'm a leadership coach and I am a soon-to-be author. I'm also a mentor and I'm a consultant and a campaigner and an activist in the space of activism and sport and fighting racial inequalities. I'm a former athlete, so I used to be a 400-meter runner back in the day. I'm a current netball player when I'm not injured, and I am really passionate about supporting and developing women, and especially young women on their journey and women who are in leadership positions. And I do the work that I do in the world because I want to make a difference and make my contribution in the space of tackling inequalities, especially around gender and race. And my heritage is I'm a Black woman of mixed heritage. My gran came here from Guyana in 1957 with one suitcase, 2 children under 5. My dad was one of those. And he met my mum in the 70s and they were part of an interracial relationship, and I'm a twin. And the lessons and the experiences that I experienced at a very early age around discrimination have actually been a part of why I do the campaigning work that I do today. And so my identity was formed really by sport and by the experiences that we had as a mixed race family back in the 70s.
Yeah, you grew up in South London, didn't you?
I did, yeah, South London, born and bred, very proud of my South London roots, and yeah.
To be for the South. Took it to the East London girl here, but my love goes for the South too. So you got into sport. How did that happen? Was it something that you just tried at school and you just thought, yep, absolutely, this is for me?
Well, as often the way, our parents have a big part to play in this. And so my mum was an athlete, and she was like one of the club manager at one point as well. And so we joined Herne Hill Harriers Athletics Club from the age of 9. And it was incredible for us because it was, for us, it was a space where we saw Black and brown people and we were a part of a collective in a way that we hadn't been before. So it was really identity affirming. And it was something that just it kind of answered all the said and unsaid questions about my identity, because when you turned up to race, that's all you were doing. It was going to be who was the fastest, who was the strongest, and the joy and the liberation that I got from competing and winning, right? Vanessa, I was a winner. But there were times when I lost as well. And sport taught me so much about resilience, because if I did lose at the weekend, you know, in the 1, the 2, the long jump or the relay, I would still come back to training the next week and turn up, right? And so it's taught me about turning up, showing up for yourself. And I just made some incredible friendships. And I didn't become the international superstar that I wanted to become, but I trained with really great athletes and I had an amazing coach. And I even went out to the US and trained out there for a bit of time. And it was just something that was an incredible experience for me. Quick story. I did train in the US at UCLA, and they were like super duper, you know, famous American athletes there, top GB athletes, Roger Black, Derek Redmond, and I was doing flat out 200-meter races, 200-meter time trials. And I was going so hard and fast in one of these trials that I actually overdid it. And round the bend, I fell over. I was mortified. Like, 8 years later, when I was working at an event, I was sat in the background in the back row. Roger Black was delivering a talk, an inspirational talk. At the end of it, I was kind of walking out and he said, "You over there." He points over and says, "You're the girl that fell over at the UCLA." And I was like, oh my gosh, how can you remember that? I thought about denying it, but then I thought, you know what, I'm 6'1", I stand out. I was just like, yeah, that was me. And so sport has always been a big part of my professional and personal identity.
Fantastic. What a story. Known as the girl that fell over, but known for so much more these days. Talk to me a little bit about the campaigning that you do, because you mentioned earlier on that kind of, I think with a lot of us in this space, it's born out of where you come from and your own lived experiences. So talk to me a little bit about kind of the campaigning that you do.
Right, Vanessa, I've got a lot of respect for the work that you do, and you're right. It's about the things that have happened to us that dictate how we kind of move forward and find our space within the world. But for me, it's like from as young as 4, I remember my mum being spat at in the street, actually being abused for having brown children. And that sense of being othered, being different. And there were these pivotal moments in our lives where white people made decisions, those people that were in power, that affected our life chances. I always remember a vicar, we went to church every week, and this particular vicar would his job was to write a reference for us at one point in our in life, in when we were like 11 years old, to get into this really great secondary school, and he refused to write the reference. And we were the only black family within the church. We would turn up every week, we would be carrying the candles and the crosses, and it was like, why did that happen? And it was only when I was writing my book that I had the conversation with my mum, and it all came out. And it's kind of like racism kind of casts this shadow and this doubt, and you're never quite sure if that's the thing that was the reason, but that's what it does. Racism just it is insidious in that way. And there were those defining moments in our lives. And so for me, from that young age, and as I was growing up, my dad sowed these seeds of personal agency. Even though there are these big social, big inequalities in the world, I always remember in the 1980s when there was the South African boycott of goods and of business and trade, and he said to us, you're not going to have a business account with the Barclays bank account. And I was like, why? Because of the connections to South Africa. So however big it seemed, he was sowing those seeds of personal agency, of your individual action can make a change. And we had become racialized in our community, and it was like, well, actually we can do this. And that has been a part of my campaigning work, and the reason why visibility and representation is so important to me, because I need to see black and brown women, I need to see women, white women, I need to see all women succeeding, so that I feel as if I can do that. And so it's been a really important part of the career decisions that I've made at different points in my life, but also about how we challenge injustice is by being a part of the solution. And that kind of that sense of my individual action can make a difference. So I would be going out and getting funding to showcase Britain's first black female football pioneer, Emma. Oh, her name's just gone from me at the moment, Emma Clark. I would be involved in doing talks within the sports industry to challenge the discrimination that I see around racism and sexism, around the intersections of those two things. We have 39 sports boards in this country, and only 1.2% of those are from women of colour. And so there are so many different complexities and contradictions. So I feel really impassioned to use my voice, to use my platform, to use my influence, and acknowledge that my privilege as a lighter skinned black woman gets me into certain places that my darker skinned black sisters wouldn't get into. So my responsibility is to make sure that I use every part of the influence and power and opportunities that I have for everybody in my communities and especially those with less influence. That was a long answer. I know I went around the houses a bit, Vanessa.
No, not at all. I think you're quite right. It's the small actions, but you also sit on a number of different boards, don't you? Like strategically trying to shape, the future and dispel some of those kind of inequalities that we face. Tell us a little bit about the boards that you sit on.
Yeah, so I sit on a board for the Sports Aid charity that basically we give funding to those young talented athletes who are at the top of their careers and to support them in their journeys. And it's also about their well-being and supporting them holistically. I'm a former trustee for the Running Me Trust, which is a race equality think tank, Britain's biggest and really real significant think tank. I sit on the Sport England Talent Inclusion Advisory Board. I'm also an independent commissioner for the Equity in Cricket Commission. And so these roles are really about me sitting in the room and asking the challenging, difficult question and being really clear, like, I don't really understand that. Or talking about where is the gender and ethnicity pay gap data? Where is this, where do I see where everybody's, what everybody's earning? How have we figured all of this out? And I ask those difficult questions. You know, people think that I'm a bit difficult, but that's what I see it as. It's like the reason why you approached me to apply for this role, the reason why I've been headhunted is because of who I am and what I bring to this. And so it is a challenge at time, right? But the work that we're doing in the world, you know that as an activist, as a campaigner, is about asking those challenging questions. And from that, you can get such enriched conversations. And, you know, I am the minority in the way that I think in lots of those spaces. And I have intentionally diversified them. So I have made it, whether or not it's been a part of the agenda of the board or not, when I start my campaign, my role with them, I'm like, right, I am making sure that I am bringing other women and other women of colour into this space. And I've done that on the various boards in all kinds of ways, and doubled and trebled the representation there. So it's the unseen work, Vanessa, you know, that's unseen.
Yeah, absolutely.
To me, that work is the stuff that it doesn't make social media and all of that stuff, but that's the work that I know makes a difference on the ground, because of the kinds of conversations that we then have that are completely different to what we had before.
And I think that's a really, I mean, obviously that's strategic work, and you're right, it's not the things that we see on social media or whatever, but that's the groundwork, that's the stuff at the roots of the problem that's really important. And I think there's something that you mentioned there as well around asking the questions, kind of like reading between the lines, asking the questions that no one else is asking in the room. And I think that stems, and I'll talk a little bit about social mobility, I think that stems from the background that both you and I came from, in the respect of coming from those kind of areas where we're up for a challenge, you know, and we can be a little bit difficult, but you have to be difficult in those situations in order to ask the uncomfortable questions, right?
But we know that that comes with the stereotypes that get, you know, laid upon us. And
also it's about having that lens in the room, right? And I think for the people watching this, you know, when we do a lot to encourage women to sit on trustee boards, to get involved with public appointments and stuff like that, and not let wherever, you know, their backgrounds be a barrier to that, because we need those lenses in the room.
But Vanessa, every time I sit on those boards, half the time I'm like, I ask the question, what are you really saying? Like, what are you saying? Because some of it is just dressed up in terminology, and like I'm deciphering it for everybody else, and they're like, I'm so glad you asked that, Michelle.
I've been there.
What are you saying? I did this in a relationship on a date the other day as well, just a funny story. I'm like, what are you really saying here? And they're like, I really like that, you're really fresh and direct, Michelle. I'm like, I haven't got time for it. Like, I'm really present to my life, right? I'm in my 40s, I'm in the perimenopause, so I'm present to my life. I don't have time to kind of try to decipher everything and use all of the strategic terminology that you need in this moment. And actually, I just need to know, what is it that you are actually saying, and what does that mean for the communities we're trying to serve? And often that clarity of thought and that clarity of expression that comes back is what everybody around the table needs.
Yeah, so take away from that, you know, be bolder, ask the direct questions, be more Michelle. That's what I'm hearing.
Loving it.
So you personally, before we get onto the book, obviously when you stick your head above the parapet, right, for communities, belief systems, whatever it is, sometimes it's easier for people to come and try and chop that head off, right, because you're putting yourself out there a little bit. Have you faced challenges along the way?
Absolutely, you know, absolutely. And I think what happens is we develop enough self-efficacy in life. And what I mean by that is, when we understand that the adversity that we face and the failures that we experience and the oppression or the marginalization, when we understand the lesson, when we understand that it's in a system, when we understand that we're not determined by the one thing that has gone wrong, and when we understand that this is a part of a system that is set up to by default not include you. When we get that, when we've done the self-awareness around it, when we really figured that out, we can then place it and we can compartmentalize it in a way that helps us to process it, right? And that to me is what then gives me my resilience, that gives me my armor. But at the same time, I have to choose my battles, because I have to be very cognizant to my own self-care, my own, and sometimes, Vanessa, I just ask a question and I don't even do the follow-up. I'm like, I can't do that right now. They may need that, but by just asking the question, I was on a, you know what I'm like, I tell stories. I was on a shortlisting panel a few years ago for a very well-known big organization, and they'd got me in to, and I'd been involved in also kind of designing a bit of the flight, the ads, the text for the promotional marketing materials, so that we could attract a diverse clientele of people. I was then part of the shortlisting panel, and then I was going to be doing the interviewing. Quick story: did the shortlisting. There was one black woman that was shortlisted. I wanted to shortlist another black woman. They said they didn't agree. I couldn't be bothered to get into the whole dialogue with them. I was like, I've just done all this work with them and they still can't see it. I felt like they'd gone for that. They'd felt like they'd ticked the diversity box, and then that was it. 2 2s. What happened? Because I'm really transparent. I copy in administrators and everybody, and I see everyone for their own strengths and skills. She put the person that I had shortlisted, that nobody else had agreed with, into the interview panel, into the interview round. So we turned up on the day and she was the last person to be interviewed, and all of the other interviewers and my panelists were like, how does she get on the list? And I was like, who knows? And then obviously she came along, she did the interview, she blew everybody out of the water. I was to see through the lines of her CV as the only black woman on that shortlisting panel. I was able to see through those lines to see that she would have had to achieve to get to those things that she'd achieved in her life. And I knew she'd be amazing. And if I hadn't have asked that question on the email, the administrator would never have included her. They said it was an error. I don't believe it was an error. And to this day, that woman has shaken up that organisation that was in post. You know, and that's because I asked the question. But I couldn't go the extra mile to have the rationale. But I just asked the question, and that's what happens from just asking a question.
Exactly. And sometimes you just do that. I'm just going to leave that there and let you think about it. It's very powerful. Tell me about the coaching. Because you're a coach as well. I mean, anyone you're coaching, you know, got to be one of the luckiest souls in the world. So tell me about that. How did you transition into that?
Well, as my whole career has been an organic journey, you know, it has literally found me. And the work that I've done in the world as a coach has just come about from sharing my experiences and wanting to mentor and support people and create like networked power. Because as a woman, as marginalized identities, we don't have that much power. But then when we leverage, when we bring it together, you know, when we stand up for ourselves, as Maya Angelou says, we're standing up for all other women, and we're bringing them with us too. And so the coaching and the mentoring and the work to support others along their journey has come about because people have I've collected mentees in my life. Even in my, you know, my senior local government roles, they would send me the people that they would say, oh, they're a bit dysfunctional. And I'm like, they're not dysfunctional. The team that they're in, the structures that they exist in are dysfunctional. And maybe the strengths are not aligned to what your values are and what you're doing. And so I would always be about supporting them. And I'm really ambitious for people's growth. Like, so when one of my mentees or coachees gets a promotion, or they achieve something really significant in their personal life, I see it as a personal win. They're winning, I'm winning, we're interdependent. And I am challenging. I am like, we're in this, I'm going to help you stretch, right? Now, I'm going to support you on that journey because I've learned a load from my experiences, both good and bad. I've been a bit of a dodgy manager at times because I took my sports mindset into the very high performing mindset into my different management roles, and they haven't worked out. So I've learned a lot in terms of the leadership style that I need to get the best out of others. And so when I'm supporting individuals, they then get to support their organizations in completely different ways. And it's about their transformation, and it's about supporting them both personally and professionally to unleash all of their potential. And I do that because I actually selfishly get a lot from that, and they get a lot from that too, you know, and it's a symbiotic relationship, and it's wonderful. I did this thing, you know, I was a consultant traditionally, and then I did a little exercise on LinkedIn, Vanessa, you'd love it because I know you're a LinkedIn queen, and I just asked people, what am I best known for? What do you think my best qualities are? And coaching came back as the #1 thing, and I wasn't even delivering coaching in my business. I was like, well, maybe I should just try this, because I'm just doing this naturally, just doing it anyway, informally. And people would always call me up for advice and support. And really like high profile people, like some people I really look up to, they'd call me in the middle of the day and say, Michelle, this has just happened. And I'm like, what? Why are they asking me? And then I'll just go into it, and I'll just say, well, I think you should do da, 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 da. So my natural kind of, you know, motivator, sports coaching element, I've always been the captain of the sports team, the kind of corralling, and then my expertise and my wisdom and my insights and counsel around how we create change makes a massive difference for those people. And then I do it in organizations as well. I go to those organizations where I think I can see women across this organization are only getting to this middle management level. Let me work with them over a period of time, and it's going to be more beneficial than you sending them on a leadership course. I guarantee you.
I agree with that.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I'm not sure. And I'm like, let's see the results. And every organization I've done it with, they're like, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah.
But you know what? They roll out leadership courses, and I go and speak at a few, but they roll out leadership courses and that will fix the women. And it's not, it's a longer game. It's a more strategic game. It's being with a woman through every single pinnacle journey of their life, you know, whether that's, you know, trying to go for the promotion, having a baby, ending a relationship, menopause, caring, the lines like that, and having someone there to support the women will keep them within the firm. So quite right that they retain you to do that. So let's talk about the book. So my copy's not arrived yet, but this is it, right? Real wins. So obviously, so you've made this huge transition out of kind of from sports into coaching, to sitting on a number of strategic boards. So at the bottom, you're making all this fantastic change or stirring up noise to bring that around. And then you thought, do you know what, as if I ain't got enough going on in my life, I'm going to write a book. Tell me about it.
Well, you know, as in how life is, it was unexpected. And it was an opportunity that found me. My agent, now I can say I've got an agent. And then
check you out.
Yeah, I know, right? My agent came and found me and said, look, we've seen you quoted in a number of books. We know the work that you do, Michelle. You know, we think you could write a book. And she sent me this really lovely email. And Vanessa, I sat on the email. I was like, I didn't even like take it on. I was just like, oh, I don't even know who these people are. And then I sent it to a friend of mine who's an author. And I hadn't spoken to him for a little while. And then he called me. He said, Michelle, you haven't responded to this email. And it was sent 3 weeks ago. I was like, oh yeah, do you think it's worth? And he's like, just respond. This is a really big opportunity. I was like, oh, okay. So it's really interesting, isn't it? I needed somebody else to endorse it.
Yeah.
For me to think, oh, to take it seriously. I was literally just going to put it into my junk mail, something I may or may not look at. And then basically they met with me, and you can see what I'm like. I just talked. I just was like, wow, this has happened to me. This is, you know, this is what I'm about. And, you know, the last thing that I said is that the reason why I do the work I do in the world is so that I can pay tribute to my gran and my granddad, who I'm looking at now, who are my inspiration, the legacy of their work to be of service to the world in all kinds of ways, is so that I can have every opportunity available to me and take opportunities to be of service to others and be of service to myself in the meantime. And they're like, Michelle, you've got to write a book. So I wrote a proposal. You know, I saw it like a championship for an athletics competition, to be honest, because you had to go and do this presentation to the publisher, and then they may or may not like you. And every time I was like, oh, yeah, that's all right. We won our semi-final. And my agent was like, we may not get into the final. We may not, you know, Michelle, I know you speak in these sporting analogies. I'm like, look, right now, I just give my very best in this moment. That's all we can guarantee. I can't guarantee whether or not they like me. I can't guarantee whether or not they like my book. But what I can do is I can turn up prepared, and I can share Michelle more with them. And if they're up for it, great. If they're not, it's not meant to be. And I talk about that in the book. I release my attachment to the outcome. I'm very present to just the high performance in that moment. And so they obviously, I got into the final and I performed and they loved it. And so the book is a leadership book that is all about my journey as a Black woman in the world, as a former sportswoman who failed, who learned so much from sport about showing up, about intentionality, about focus, about mindset, and how I translated that into my professional career. And then in my professional career, I wasn't a great manager at one point, and how I had to completely do a 360 and develop the leadership qualities of a conscious leader, of somebody who had integrity, somebody who had accountability, who was empathetic. And that then enabled me to really revolutionize how I led and how I managed and supported others. And then out of all of that, how I navigated the world and my professional career that is enriched by being a Black woman, but also complicated by being a Black woman, right? And so throughout the journey of the book, I pull out the tools that leaders can use to make sure that their work cultures and environments are more inclusive. So and also it's a bit funny because I'm a bit funny, and I tell stories and I use the insights of the incredible high profile athletes that I interviewed and the business leaders that I interviewed, and I weave in everything to do with our personal and professional development. So you can see what I'm like. It's very accessible. It's not, it's friendly, because I get bored really easily. So I tell stories in the work and I pull out the messages, but it's for the individual leader in each of us. It's for all of us to find that and then unleash that potential and then figure out the strategies that we need to do that. So I use a lot of things around how we can, really lean into our identity, be authentic, develop our confidence, understand the mindset techniques that go with self-belief, and everything that will enable us to be more of who we are in the world as our authentic selves. So I'm new to the book world, right? So I'm sharing my truths in the anticipation that it will support people on their journey, and especially women, because for me, that's my number one audience are people and leaders, but my number one audience are going to be people that relate to me as much as a fellow woman. So I think that it's been a journey. It's not been easy, but I've taken my sports mindset and I've overlaid it onto this, and I'm like, well, this is my real win. This is a piece of work that I worked on during the last 18 months, during some of the most challenging times of my life, and actually I'm really proud of this end piece of work. And I've got a big deal publisher, I've got an agent, and this whole thing then takes on a life of its own. But that's real wins. And
it's a magical moment, right, when you hold that book. I mean, I remember mine is similar to yours, very conversational. I believe that people hear stories and you attach the learning points to them. So I'm sure it's, like I say, I can't wait to get my copy. Is it going to be a kind of a cracking read from an actual practical perspective? But it's also good when a book's got a bit of humor, because it shows the person that you don't always see when people write books. I've interviewed many authors, and the person I get to talk to doesn't match up to the author, whereas I've got a feeling your book is going to be spot on in terms of who you are.
I can't hide it. Exactly what I'm like. And the editor's like, do you really want to include that, Michelle? I'm like, yes. The more
it's got to be real, and also with the mistakes as well. And I'm a true believer in that. No one wants to read a rosy picture, right? Because it's a great read, but sometimes it can make the audience feel even more inferior if it looking you've ever done is turned gold, because you and I know that life ain't like that.
Absolutely. And that's one of the big fundamental parts of the book, is about how we understand and interpret failure, how we externalize our fears. Actually one of the biggest things is how do we not kind of just give into it? How do we actually play out the fact that sometimes we are really, really fearful of something that we really, really want, and how do we release ourselves from that kind of anxiety that goes with that? And I tell a quick story about one of the athletes that I know. I'm not going to say her name because I don't want to ruin it. It's like it's like a suspense moment. But she talks about having this real pressure for this particular big global event, and for her event, And what her coach got her to do is to write the headline, right? Write the headline for tomorrow's newspaper. Write it now, right? That's it. And then when she wrote that down, she visualized it, then she just let it go. She gave that to him. He said, that's it. All you're now going to do is concentrate on the execution of this race, right? And so what he'd done is he'd regulated her emotions to the perceived pressure, and he'd separated them out, and so that therefore enabled her to be freer and more liberated in her performance, because all she had to concentrate on was her execution, which she'd trained for, right? So we can apply that in our professional lives all day long. Whatever we fear, we can externalize it, we can write it down, we can talk about it, and then we can just concentrate on the bits of the technique and the skill and the expertise that we need in that moment, and it releases us from the tension and the pressure of that particular situation.
Fantastic. I love that. Write your own headline. Now, Michelle, you and I could talk for absolutely hours. And for those of you watching, there is another conversation that me and Michelle are having on my Instagram account on Vanessa Vallely OBE, where we talk about lots of different things. But for the purpose of this one, it's been absolutely. So the book's out 25th of November, I believe, but it's available for pre-order now. And where can they find that?
So they can find that on Amazon, in Waterstones, in WH Smith's, and all good bookshops. And on our website, I need to get the sales petal right. And there's going to be an audio, because I like listening to books, right? We learn differently. And you know, you can put me on in the background as well. I don't mind that, people. I would love it if you could pre-order my book, because I didn't understand the whole pre-order campaign stuff. That's very significant for first-time authors, because people don't know who necessarily I am, because I'm a debut author. Although that is a surprise to me, right, Vanessa? Like, how could that not happen? But anyway, so I would love it if you could pre-order my book. I've also written another chapter, an essay called Why Black British Athletes Matter, in an anthology of a book called Black British Lives Matter, which is edited by Lenny Henry and Marcus Ryder, with 17 prominent Black people and their other essays. So it would be great if people could check those out and pre-order and make a big difference to my this journey, the Real Wins journey, and to, you know,
support this woman, right? However you lot are seeing it on the camera, let's give us some support. Get the pre-orders in. And where can they find you on social media?
On Instagram, I'm michellmoore.me. On Twitter, I'm at hello Moore. And Facebook, Michelle Moore, and LinkedIn, Michelle Moore FRSA. I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Sounds very posh, but I'm not. And I just wanted to say, though, Vanessa, you were one of the first people to email, to DM me and congratulate me on the book, and to offer this opportunity. And you know, these platforms are really significant, and the work that you do in the world is incredible, and I'm really supportive of that and really thankful for that and grateful for the opportunity, because you know, sometimes people make all kinds of assumptions about women and about me actually in a leadership role, and we need other women to recognize and see us and to give us that platform, and you've done that on a couple of occasions, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the work that you do in the world, supporting other women and creating those real networks of power and community.
Well, thank you. And I'm very grateful for you and to have you in our life and the work that you do for so many behind the scenes. So there's a lot of love here, people, as you can see. So let's support Michelle. Let's get out and pre-order that book. I'm sure Michelle will be doing a tour. There'll be events next year in 2022. We'll be featuring them on We Are the City. But for now, give it up. Thank you so much for the fantastic Michelle Moore.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thanks for joining us.